Marcus thinks I am merely a decorative object, a silent wife who knows nothing of the tech empire he controls. But as he publicly mocks my intelligence to stroke his ego before his board and his mistress, he makes his final mistake. He does not know I am holding the evidence of their embezzlement, and I have decided that tonight is the night I burn everything down. My name is Elena Vance, and at 34 years old, I have mastered the art of becoming invisible while standing in the center of a room. The annual cocktail party for Thorne Dynamics was in full swing, held in a ballroom that overlooked the glittering Chicago skyline, but the temperature inside felt 10 degrees colder than the October wind whipping against the glass. I stood beside my husband, Marcus Thorne, the CEO of this technology empire, functioning exactly as he intended me to function. I was the silent, polished ornament attached to his arm, reflecting his success back at him like a mirror. Marcus looked every bit the titan of industry in his $4,000 bespoke suit. He possessed a shark-like charm that drew people in, a dazzling smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Those eyes were currently scanning the room with a predatory gleam, checking for threats and opportunities, occasionally darting down to check my posture with a microscopic frown of disapproval. His hand rested on the small of my back, not in a gesture of affection, but of control. His fingers dug in slightly, a silent command to stand straighter, to smile wider, to be less of a person and more of a prop. Then Sarah Jenkins materialized from the crowd. As the director of human resources, she should have maintained a professional distance, but she slid into our circle with a familiarity that made the hair on my arms stand up. She wore a dress that skirted the edge of appropriate corporate attire, and her gaze lingered on Marcus for a second too long before flicking to me with thinly veiled amusement. "Marcus," she purred, ignoring the social protocol of greeting the spouse first. "The investors are absolutely raving about the quarterly projections. You are simply brilliant tonight." Marcus preened under her praise, his chest puffing out. He turned to the two senior partners standing with us, men who controlled millions in capital, and decided it was time to perform his favorite party trick, diminishing me to elevate himself. "It is a team effort," Marcus said, his voice smooth as silk. "Though I suppose the burden of leadership is a lonely one. Elena here certainly keeps the home front peaceful so I can focus on the real work." One of the partners, a gray-haired man named Mr. Henderson, looked at me politely. "And what do you do?" "Elena, I seem to recall you had a background in finance." Before I could open my mouth, Marcus laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. "Oh, no, Elena. She dabbles, perhaps, but she doesn't. Well, she doesn't understand the complex numbers we deal with. Do you, darling?" He squeezed my waist. Hard. "She is my emotional support system. The math it is just too much for her pretty head." The partners chuckled, an awkward, obliging sound. Sarah Jenkins, however, let out a laugh that was sharp and cruel. "It is so sweet, really," Sarah said, tilting her head at me. "To have such a simple life. No stress, just shopping and dinners." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from a cold, simmering rage that I had to swallow down like broken glass. I forced my lips into a stiff, plastic smile. "I do my best," I said, my voice steady, though inside I was screaming. "And we love you for it," Marcus said, dismissing me entirely as he turned back to Sarah. That was when I saw it. It was quick, barely a flicker in time. As the group laughed at another one of Marcus's jokes, his hand dropped from my back and brushed against Sarah's hip. It was not accidental. Her fingers grazed his cuff in return. A secret, electric communication that spoke of late nights and shared sheets. They stood there, basking in their shared arrogance, thinking I was too stupid to see the infidelity paraded right in front of my face. I remembered the man Marcus used to be 4 years ago, or perhaps the man he had pretended to be. He had promised me a partnership of equals. He had sworn he respected my mind. Standing here now, surrounded by the smell of expensive cologne and the sound of fake laughter, the contrast was a physical ache in my chest. He thought he had broken me. He thought I was the trophy wife who would tolerate anything to stay in the penthouse. He was wrong. I took a sip of my champagne, the bubbles bursting sharply against my tongue. Let them laugh. Let Sarah smirk, and let Marcus believe he is the smartest person in the room. They had no idea that the woman standing silently beside them was not fragile. I was not helpless. I was merely counting down the seconds until I destroyed them both. If Marcus knew what I actually did for a living, he would likely choke on his 20-year-old scotch. He sees a woman who arranges flowers and attends charity luncheons, a gentle creature who needs his strong hand to guide her through the brutal world of business. The irony is so rich it almost tastes metallic on my tongue. I am not merely a housewife. I am a senior crisis management expert at Veritas Strategy, a shadow consultancy firm that does not advertise, does not have a website, and does not appear on any public map. When a Fortune 500 CEO is caught in a scandal that threatens to wipe billions off their stock value, they do not call the police or a publicist. They call us. My job is to make problems disappear. I sanitize reputations, bury financial disasters, and reconstruct narratives for the most powerful people on the planet. I handle levels of stress before breakfast that would send Marcus into cardiac arrest. I hid this from him for a reason. When we met 4 years ago, I was tired of the Shark Tank. I wanted a sanctuary. I wanted a man who loved Elena the woman, not Elena the fixer who could salvage his quarterly earnings. At that time, Marcus was a young CEO drowning in debt, his ambition far outstripping his capabilities. He did not know it then, and he does not know it now. But I was the one who saved him. I saw his potential, and through a complex web of intermediaries and shell companies, I routed a critical contract to Thorne Dynamics that pulled him back from the brink of bankruptcy. He came home that night, flushed with victory, spinning me around in the kitchen. "I did it, Elena," he had shouted, his eyes bright. I finally cracked the code. They said I couldn't handle the supply chain, but I showed them. I had smiled, kissing his cheek, letting him believe he was the genius. I fell in love with his relief, his vulnerability. But I made a fatal miscalculation. Marcus did not love me for my mind or my heart. He fell in love with my silence. He loved the gentle facade because it acted as a blank canvas upon which he could project his own image of a powerful protector. He loved his reflection in my eyes, not the woman standing behind them. My clutch vibrated, snapping me back to the present. I pulled out my phone, shielding the screen from prying eyes. It was a secure message from Claire, my top analyst at Veritas, flagged a massive irregularity in Thorne Dynamics' operating capital. 7 distinct transfers in the last 6 months. Do you want the trace? I took a slow breath. Marcus had just mocked me for not understanding complex numbers, yet here I was, looking at a preliminary forensic audit that suggested he was hemorrhaging money. The audacity was breathtaking, while he thought I was at home looking up recipes for roast chicken. I was usually coordinating legal teams to save multinational conglomerates from federal indictments. I looked across the room. Marcus was leaning in close to Sarah Jenkins, whispering something that made her throw her head back in laughter. The signs had been there for months, but I had chosen to give him the benefit of the doubt. The coldness in his bed, the sudden, unexplained business trips to locations that made no strategic sense for the company. The way he guarded his phone like it contained nuclear codes. I typed a reply to Claire Pull everything. Go deep. I slid the phone back into my bag. The sadness I expected to feel was absent. Instead, a cold, clinical clarity washed over me. This was no longer a marriage. It was a hostile work environment, and I was the best cleaner in the business. You look lost in thought, darling, a voice said. I looked up to see Marcus standing there, looking down at me with that patronizing smirk. Just admiring the view. Marcus, I said, my voice sweet and hollow. It is amazing how clear things look from up here." "Well, try not to think too hard," he said, patting my cheek. "We wouldn't want you to get a headache." I watched him walk away, back toward the woman he was using to humiliate me. He had no idea that he had just declared war on the only person who knew how to save him. I would not divorce him in silence. I would not fade away. I was going to find the truth behind his arrogance, and I was going to dismantle his life with the same precision I used to build others up. The countdown had officially begun. I did not need to hire a private investigator, and I certainly did not need to debase myself by installing tracking software on Marcus's phone. Amateurs look for texts, professionals follow the money. I treated my marriage exactly like a failing conglomerate I had been hired to restructure. I sat in my home office with a pot of black coffee and the publicly available quarterly financial reports of Thorne Dynamics. To the untrained eye, the balance sheets looked healthy. But I have spent a decade finding needles in haystacks for panicked billionaires. I zeroed in on the operational expenses. There it was, buried under the vague heading of External Human Capital Development. The line item for expenses had spiked aggressively over the last 6 months. $75,000 in May, I whispered to the empty room, tracing the line with my finger. $82,000 in June, $90,000 in July. I cross-referenced the vendor code. The payments were going to a limited liability company called SJ Consulting. It was almost insulting how lazy they were. SJ, Sarah Jenkins. I dug deeper into the vendor approval logs, accessing the system with a backdoor password Marcus had given me 4 years ago when he was too tired to approve invoices himself. Every single payment to SJ Consulting was double-signed requested by Sarah Jenkins, approved by Marcus Thorne. They were funneling nearly $500,000 out of the company right under the board's nose. The next day, I gathered more intelligence, but this time I traded my spreadsheets for a Chanel suit. I attended a charity luncheon with the wives of the other executives. It was a tedious affair of picking at salads and feigning interest in silent auctions, but it was a goldmine for information. I sat next to Linda, the wife of the chief financial officer. She was a woman who could not keep a secret if her life depended on it. "Have you seen where Sarah is living now?" Linda whispered, leaning in over her sparkling water. "She just closed on a penthouse at the Spire. I mean, I know she does well, but that building the HOA fees alone must be, well, they must be $5,000 a month." "Is that so?" I asked, feigning mild surprise. "She must be very good at budgeting." "It is strange," Linda continued, her voice dropping. "My husband said the HR budget was tight this year, no bonuses for the junior staff, and yet, here she is buying prime real estate." The final piece of the puzzle fell into my lap 2 days later. Marcus had returned from a 3-day investor relations retreat in Miami. While he was in the shower washing off the gilt, I picked up his suit jacket to take it to the dry cleaner. I felt the crinkle of paper in the inside breast pocket. It was a hotel receipt from the Four Seasons in Miami. It was not for a conference room, it was for the presidential suite. And there, listed under the room service charges, was a dinner for 2, including a bottle of vintage champagne priced at $800. The date coincided perfectly with the dates Sarah had been posting photos of a solo beach getaway on her Instagram. When Marcus walked into the bedroom, towel drying his hair, he was holding a small velvet box. "For you," he said, handing it to me with that practiced, charming smile. I felt bad about being away so much lately. I opened the box. It was a diamond tennis bracelet, likely costing around $10,000. It was beautiful, expensive, and completely devoid of meaning. It was hush money. "Oh, Marcus," I said, widening my eyes. "It is beautiful. Thank you." "I just wanted to make you smile," he said, kissing my forehead. I fought the urge to recoil. How was the trip? Was the investor meeting intense? He sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed, looking the picture of the weary warrior. Brutal. Just absolutely brutal. We were in conference rooms for 12 hours a day. I barely saw the sun. But I'd do it for us. You know, I know, I said softly, fastening the bracelet around my wrist. The diamonds felt like shackles. You work so hard. I do, he said, lying with a fluidity that was almost impressive. But having you here, it makes it all worth it. You are my rock, Elena. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the arrogance in his jawline, the deceit in his eyes. He truly believed I was this naive. He believed a shiny piece of jewelry could purchase my blindness. I am so lucky to have a husband who is so dedicated, I said. My voice was steady. My smile was perfect. But inside, the last remnant of love I had for him withered and died. He was not just a cheater. He was a thief and a liar who underestimated the woman sleeping beside him. I touched the cold metal of the bracelet. He had bought me a gift with stolen money, and soon he would pay the price for every single cent. The atmosphere in the house shifted a few days later when Marcus announced the upcoming town hall meeting. He stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie, treating me like a scheduler rather than a wife. It is a mandatory all-hands meeting, Elena, Marcus said, not bothering to look at me. The board will be there. Key investors. I need you in the front row. Wear that pale blue dress, the one with the lace. It makes you look soft, approachable. Of course, I said, folding a towel with precise, sharp movements. What is my role? Your role. He chuckled, a sound that grated against my nerves like sandpaper. Just sit there. Smile. Look adoring. Remind everyone that I am a family man. Do not try to talk about business. We do not want you confusing the shareholders. That evening, the humiliation escalated. Sarah Jenkins arrived at our home at 9 o'clock at night. She claimed it was an emergency strategy session for the upcoming meeting, but she walked in with a bottle of wine and a confidence that reeked of ownership. I served them drinks in the living room, playing the part of the dutiful hostess. Sarah sat on my Italian leather sofa, her legs crossed, her skirt riding high up her thigh. When I handed her a crystal tumbler of water, she looked me dead in the eye. Thank you, Elena, she said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. You are such a accommodating host. I do not know how you find the time to keep the house so lovely. It is easy when you have nothing else to worry about, Marcus interjected, winking at her. I retreated to the kitchen but left the door slightly ajar. From the shadows, I watched. Sarah took a sip of water and deliberately placed the glass down on the polished mahogany coaster. She left a bright, jagged smear of red lipstick on the rim. It was a territorial mark, a dog lifting its leg on a fire hydrant. She glanced toward the kitchen, knowing I was watching, and offered a look of pity so profound it made my blood run cold. It was the look one gives to a dying animal, but it was what they said next that hardened my resolve from personal vengeance to righteous justice. The numbers are still off for the third quarter, Sarah said, her voice dropping but still audible to my trained ear. The withdrawals we made, the audit committee is going to ask questions about the liquidity gap. We will blame it on market volatility, Marcus dismissed, waving his hand. But we need to plug the hole before the fiscal year ends. I have a list, Sarah said, the sound of paper rustling following her words. We can initiate a reduction in force. If we cut 15% of the customer support staff and freeze the pension contributions for the warehouse team, we can cover the missing $2 million. Do it, Marcus said without a second of hesitation. They are expendable. Get the paperwork ready. We will announce the restructuring for the greater good of the company. I stood frozen in the dark kitchen, gripping the granite countertop until my knuckles turned white. They were not just stealing from a faceless corporation. They were planning to fire 200 hardworking people, fathers, mothers, people with mortgages and sick children just to cover up the money they had stolen to buy penthouses and diamond bracelets. This was no longer just about me. This was about survival for hundreds of innocent families. I walked upstairs to my private study and locked the door. I pulled out my burner phone and dialed a number I had not used in 3 years. "Agent Miller," a gruff voice answered on the second ring. "Hello, David," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "It is Elena. I am sending you a package via encrypted courier. You are going to want to see this. It concerns massive embezzlement and securities fraud at Thorne Dynamics." Elena. He sounded surprised. I haven't heard from you since the scandalous collapse of the Omnicorp Ponzi scheme. Are you back in the game?" "I am," I said. "And David, make sure your team is ready for a pickup on Friday morning. I will deliver the perpetrators to you personally." I hung up and walked to my closet. I pushed aside the pale blue lace dress Marcus had selected. It looked weak, submissive, fragile. Instead, I reached for the back of the wardrobe. I pulled out a bespoke charcoal gray suit with razor-sharp lapels, the kind of suit I used to wear when I walked into boardrooms to fire incompetent CEOs. I held it up against my body in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was no longer Marcus's wife. She was the executioner. "Friday," I whispered to my reflection. "Friday. We burn it all down." The morning of the town hall meeting arrived with a suffocating tension. Marcus was a whirlwind of nerves and snapping aggression, pacing our bedroom floor as if he were preparing for a boxing match rather than a corporate presentation. He was sweating through his first shirt before he had even finished his coffee. Do not say anything stupid today. Elena," he spat, adjusting his cufflinks with trembling hands. "The shareholders are edgy. The last thing I need is you rambling about your book club or whatever it is you do all day. Just sit there and be silent. Do not make me lose face." I walked over to him, calm and composed in my charcoal suit, a stark contrast to his frantic energy. I reached out and straightened his silk tie, my fingers lingering near his throat for a second longer than necessary. "Don't worry, Marcus," I whispered, looking deep into his anxious eyes. "You will have a day you will never forget." He blinked, missing the threat entirely, hearing only reassurance. Good. Just try to blend in." When we arrived at the Thorne Dynamics headquarters, Sarah Jenkins was waiting in the lobby. She looked every inch the corporate shark, wearing a crimson dress that was more appropriate for a cocktail bar than a boardroom. She stepped forward to greet Marcus, practically body-checking me out of the way. "Marcus, the board is already assembling," she said, her voice breathless. Then she turned to me, her smile tight and dismissive. "Elena, so glad you could make it. Here is your itinerary." She handed me a printed sheet of paper. "The spouse seating is in the overflow room on the 4th floor. You will be much more comfortable there. The main hall is strictly for business-critical personnel." I took the paper, glancing at it. It was a clumsy, amateurish power play. She wanted me out of sight, tucked away where I couldn't witness her moment of glory next to my husband. "Thank you, Sarah," I said, folding the paper and slipping it into my pocket. "You are always so thoughtful." As they hurried toward the elevators for the executive suite, I turned and walked in the opposite direction. I knew this building better than the architect who designed it. I had ghost-written the security protocols 4 years ago. I did not go to the overflow room. I went straight to the basement, to the server room. The security guard at the desk was new, a young man barely out of his 20s. He started to stand up as I approached the biometric scanner. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area," he began. "I am Mrs. Thorne," I said, my voice carrying the unquestionable weight of authority. "I am here for a surprise inspection of the cooling systems before the CEO's speech. You do not want to be the reason the servers overheat during the town hall, do you?" He hesitated, then sat back down. No, ma'am." I swiped an old admin card I had kept hidden in my jewelry box. The light turned green. I was in. The hum of the servers was a familiar comfort. I moved quickly to the main terminal. My fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing the firewalls I had helped install. I wasn't looking for financial data this time. I had enough of that. I needed the human element. I accessed the internal chat logs, specifically the encrypted channel between the CEO and the director of HR. It was all there. The digital footprint of their betrayal. Marcus. The liquidity gap is growing. We need to hide the SJ consulting payments. Sarah, I will shift the funds from the employee pension pool. Nobody looks there until end of year. Marcus, good girl. I will make it up to you tonight. That hotel in Miami. Sarah can't wait. Does the wife suspect Marcus Elena? Please? She thinks I am a god. She is clueless. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. I plugged in my secure USB drive and initiated the download. The progress bar filled up 20%, 50%, 100%. Evidence secured. I checked my watch. The meeting was starting in 5 minutes. I left the server room and took the service elevator up to the main auditorium. I didn't go to the 4th floor. I walked straight to the double doors of the main hall. The room was packed with hundreds of employees and shareholders. Marcus was already on stage, adjusting the microphone, basking in the applause. I walked down the center aisle, my heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. Heads turned. Sarah, standing in the wings, went pale as she saw me. I ignored the usher who tried to guide me to the back. I walked right to the front row, center seat, directly opposite the podium. I sat down, crossed my legs, and locked eyes with Marcus. He faltered for a fraction of a second, his confidence wavering as he saw me sitting there, not in the back, but front and center, wearing a suit sharper than his own. I touched the USB drive in my pocket. Let the show begin. The grand auditorium of Thorne Dynamics was designed to intimidate. It was a cavernous space filled with plush velvet seats, gleaming mahogany paneling, and a lighting rig that cost more than my parents' house. Today, it was packed to capacity. Every board member, every major shareholder, and hundreds of employees sat in the darkened rows, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of their tablets and phones. They were waiting for a savior, and Marcus was more than happy to play the part. He strode onto the stage to thunderous applause, the spotlight catching the gold threads in his tie. He looked magnificent, I had to admit. He possessed the kind of charisma that could sell ice to a polar bear, or in this case, sell a failing company to a room full of people he was actively robbing. Behind him, a massive screen flickered to life, displaying the title of his presentation in bold, sans serif letters, Transparency and Responsibility, A New Era. I almost laughed out loud. The audacity was breathtaking. "Thank you," Marcus boomed, his voice amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system. "Thank you all. We are here today to celebrate truth. We are here to celebrate resilience." I shifted in my seat, my eyes drifting to the wings of the stage. Sarah Jenkins stood there, half hidden by a heavy velvet curtain. She was not watching the audience. She was watching Marcus. Her gaze was predatory and possessive, a look that said, "He is mine." She stood with her arms crossed, a smug smile playing on her lips as if she were the queen surveying her kingdom. Marcus clicked a remote, and a series of bar charts appeared on the screen behind him. They showed lines going up, sharp green arrows pointing toward the heavens. "As you can see," Marcus said, gesturing grandly to the fabricated data, "our third-quarter revenue has increased by 25%. We have streamlined our operations and cut the fat." "Cut the fat" was his euphemism for the embezzlement scheme I had uncovered in the server room. He was presenting theft as efficiency. The presentation moved into the question and answer session. This was usually the most dangerous part of any town hall, but Marcus had rigged the deck. I watched as hands shot up across the room. A forensic accountant in the third row raised his hand high, likely wanting to ask about the discrepancies in the cash flow statement. Marcus ignored him completely. Instead, he pointed to a young marketing associate in the second row, a man I knew had been hired by Sarah just 2 weeks ago. Yes, you in the blue shirt," Marcus said benevolently. "Mr. Thorne?" the young man stammered, clearly rehearsing a line. How do you manage to maintain such high ethical standards while driving such aggressive growth? That is a great question, Marcus said, feigning humility. It comes down to integrity. It comes down to knowing what is right. He paused, letting the silence hang for dramatic effect. Then, his eyes scanned the front row and landed on me. I saw the spark of malice ignite in his pupils. He was high on his own supply, drunk on the adoration of the crowd, and he could not resist the urge to kick me one last time to elevate himself. "You know," Marcus said, a chuckle rumbling in his throat as he walked to the edge of the stage, looming over me. "It is not always easy. Sometimes the business world is too complex for the uninitiated. Even my lovely wife, Elena, whose biggest worry in life is securing a spa appointment or finding the right pair of shoes, even she understands that the company is thriving." The room erupted in laughter. It was a low rumble of amusement that washed over me. I saw people turning in their seats to look at the trophy wife in the front row. Their eyes held a mixture of pity and dismissal. I looked over at the wing of the stage. Sarah was laughing too. She leaned over to the assistant standing next to her, whispering something behind her hand. Her eyes locked on me with triumphant mockery. Marcus beamed, thinking he had scored a point. He thought I would blush. He thought I would look down at my lap in shame. But he was wrong. I felt a cold, metallic calm settle over my skin. That insult was the signal I had been waiting for. It was the drop of water that caused the dam to break. I did not look down. I looked up, directly into the blinding light of the stage, and I smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Enjoy the laugh. Marcus," I thought, my hand tightening around the microphone I had discreetly taken from the unsuspecting sound technician who had passed by moments earlier, "because it is the last one you will ever have." The laughter was supposed to be the sound of my submission, but instead, it became the soundtrack to my resurrection. I did not look down at my hands. I did not blush. I slowly uncrossed my legs and stood up. The movement was fluid and sharp, cutting through the atmosphere of the room like a knife. A junior audio technician was standing in the aisle just a few feet away from me, holding a wireless microphone intended for the audience Q&A session. I stepped toward him, my eyes fixed on the stage. He looked startled as I reached out and firmly took the device from his hand. "Thank you," I said, my voice low and steady. I switched the microphone on. The feedback whine shrieked for a split second, silencing the room instantly. The laughter died in their throats. 400 heads turned in unison. On stage. Marcus frowned, his perfect smile faltering into a look of confusion and annoyance. He raised his hand, signaling to the security team in the back of the room, but they were too slow. I was already speaking. "Marcus," I said, my voice booming through the auditorium with a clarity and resonance that commanded absolute attention. "Before we celebrate these figures, I have a question regarding the footnotes on page 42 of the quarterly report." Marcus froze. The sheer incongruity of his trophy wife citing a specific page number of a financial document seemed to short-circuit his brain. He laughed nervously, shifting his weight. "Elena, darling," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Please, sit down. You are interrupting the flow. Security will help you back to your seat." "I am comfortable where I am," I replied, my tone icy. "My question concerns the liquidity ratio. You claimed a 25% growth in operational efficiency, yet the cash flow statement shows a significant, recurring outflow labeled as external consultant fees that does not correlate with any known project. Can you explain why the burn rate has accelerated by 12% despite the revenue increase?" The silence in the room was now heavy, suffocating. The board members in the front row straightened up, their eyes narrowing. They recognized the language. This was not the vocabulary of a housewife. It was the vocabulary of a forensic auditor. Marcus gripped the podium, his knuckles turning white. He tried to salvage the situation with the only weapon he had left dismissal. Elena," he stammered, forcing a chuckle that sounded like a cough. "Honey, listen to yourself. You are using big words you heard on the news. You do not understand how these things work. It is complicated accounting." I smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had just trapped its prey. "Is it?" I asked, taking a slow step toward the stage. "Then perhaps you can explain it to me simply. Can you explain why the line item for human resource development totals exactly $312,000 over the last 6 months? And can you explain why that figure is the exact, down-to-the-penny purchase price of the penthouse apartment at the Spire, Unit 42B, which was closed on last week by your Director of Human Resources?" The reaction was instantaneous. A collective gasp swept through the hall. Hundreds of eyes snapped from me to the wing of the stage. Sarah Jenkins was standing there, her face drained of all blood, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. She took a step back, but there was nowhere to hide. I did not stop. My mind was a steel trap, releasing the data I had memorized from the server logs. "August 4th, I recited, my voice ringing out like a judge delivering a verdict. "Transfer of $52,000 to SJ Consulting. August 28th. Transfer of $48,000. September 15th. $65,000. All authorized by CEO Marcus Thorne. All routed to a shell company registered to an address that does not exist." The sound of whispering began to rise like a tide. I saw the chief financial officer pull out his phone, frantically tapping on the screen. The investors were looking at each other, their faces hardening. The illusion of the golden couple was shattering in real time. "Marcus," I continued, staring him down, "you told the shareholders you were cutting fat. It appears you were just carving out a retirement fund for your mistress." Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the screen behind him, then back at me, terror finally replacing his arrogance. He realized, too late, that he had not brought a decorative ornament to his meeting. He had brought his executioner. "Cut the feed!" Marcus screamed, his voice cracking as it echoed through the speakers. He abandoned all pretense of composure, waving his arms frantically at the sound booth in the back. "Cut her microphone right now. Are you deaf? Shut it down." The technicians hesitated, looking from their furious CEO to the woman calmly dismantling him with facts. But it did not matter if they cut my audio. I had already planted the real bomb in the system hours ago, back in the cool silence of the server room. "You can turn off my microphone, Marcus," I said, my voice projecting clearly even as the audio dampened slightly. "But you cannot turn off the truth." I pressed a single key on my phone, executing the command script I had queued up earlier. Behind Marcus, the towering screen displaying the fabricated growth charts flickered and went black. A heartbeat later, it roared back to life, but the bar graphs were gone. In their place were high-resolution screenshots of the encrypted chat logs I had extracted. They were blown up to 10 feet tall, impossible to miss. The text was sharp and damning. "Marcus, we need to move another $50,000 to the Shell account. I need that watch." "Sarah, done. What about Elena Will?" She noticed the discrepancy. "Marcus, don't worry. My wife is stupid. She thinks liquidity is a type of facial treatment. She has no idea where the money goes." A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room, followed immediately by the chaotic frenzy of hundreds of smartphones being raised. The sound of camera shutters clicking was like the sound of hail hitting a tin roof, a relentless staccato of documentation. The flashbulbs popped in blinding bursts, illuminating Marcus's face, which had turned the color of old ash. That is a fabrication." Marcus yelled, though his voice shook violently. "She hacked the system. It is AI. It is a deep fake." "Is the bank transfer a deep fake too?" "Marcus," I asked, raising my voice to cut through the rising clamor. I tapped my phone again. The screen shifted to display a series of digital invoices. "Here we have 5 transfers labeled Performance Bonus sent directly from the company operating fund to a personal account ending in 4922. That account belongs to Sarah Jenkins. I turned my gaze to the wings of the stage. Sarah was trembling, clutching the velvet curtain as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. And speaking of Ms. Jenkins, I continued, my tone hardening into steel, I believe you are quite familiar with the Thorn Dynamics Employee Handbook, specifically Article 4, Section 2, regarding conflicts of interest and illicit fraternization within the executive team. I paused, letting the words hang in the air like a guillotine blade. You wrote that policy yourself, didn't you? Sarah, I asked, my voice dripping with cold sarcasm. It states clearly that any executive found embezzling funds or engaging in an undisclosed romantic relationship with a direct report is subject to immediate termination and legal prosecution. Surely, as the Director of Human Resources, you remember the rules for firing people, or do they only apply to the employees you were planning to lay off next week to cover your theft? Sarah let out a choked sob. She looked at the sea of hostile faces in the audience, the very people she had called expendable in her private chats. Panic seized her. She turned and tried to bolt toward the emergency exit on the side of the stage, but she didn't make it. 3 burly warehouse managers, men whose pensions she had planned to raid, stepped in front of the door. They didn't touch her. They just stood there, a wall of crossed arms and unforgiving stares. Sarah froze, trapped like a rat in a cage. On the stage, Marcus was unraveling. He gripped the podium with both hands, sweat streaming down his face, soaking into his expensive collar. He looked at the screen, then at the audience, and finally at me. The mask of the confident, arrogant CEO had completely disintegrated. He was just a small, scared man standing in the wreckage of his own ego. Elena, he whispered into the microphone, the sound amplifying his desperation for everyone to hear. Please, stop. I am not the one who needs to stop. Marcus, I said, staring him down. I am just the one finishing what you started. The chaos in the auditorium was deafening. It was the sound of an empire crumbling in real time. Mr. Henderson, the senior partner who had dismissed me earlier that evening, stood up from his seat in the front row. His face was purple with rage as he pointed a trembling finger at the stage. Explain this, Thorn, Henderson bellowed, his voice cutting through the din. Explain to me why half of our operating capital is sitting in your mistress's bank account. Marcus looked like a cornered animal. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve, ruining his impeccable suit. He grabbed the microphone stand, his knuckles white, and tried to shout over the uproar. She is lying, Marcus screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. Do not listen to her. My wife is... She is sick. She is having a mental breakdown. This is all. It is all just jealous paranoia because she spends too much time alone at home. She is delusional. He looked at me with eyes full of hatred, trying to use the very housewife image he had cultivated to destroy my credibility. He thought that if he called me crazy loud enough, the men in suits would believe him. I did not flinch. I took a step closer to the stage, moving into the spotlight so that everyone could see me clearly. I was done being the ornament. You are right about one thing, Marcus, I said, my voice calm and deadly steady. I have been spending a lot of time alone, but I was not baking cookies. I turned to the audience, addressing the board of directors directly. My name is Elena Vance, I announced, my voice projecting with the authority of a courtroom judge. I am not just a housewife. I am a senior crisis management expert at Veritas Strategy. For the last decade, I have cleaned up the toxic waste of companies 10 times the size of this one. I have buried scandals for senators and saved billionaires from bankruptcy. But today, I paused, looking back at Marcus, who stood frozen on the stage. Today, I am finally cleaning up the mess in my own life. As if on cue, the heavy double doors at the back of the auditorium burst open with a loud crash that silenced the room instantly. Federal agents, a voice boomed. Nobody move. Agent Miller walked in, flanked by 4 uniformed officers and 2 representatives from the Securities and Exchange Commission. I had timed it perfectly. They marched down the center aisle, the sound of their heavy boots echoing on the floor. "Marcus Thorne and Sarah Jenkins," Miller shouted, holding up a warrant. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud." Sarah let out a high-pitched scream. She tried to scramble away, but the warehouse managers who had blocked the exit grabbed her arms. She kicked and sobbed, mascara running down her face in black streaks, screaming that it was all Marcus's idea. On the stage, the reality finally hit Marcus. 2 officers ascended the stairs, pulling his arms behind his back. The metallic click of the handcuffs locking into place was the loudest sound in the room. Marcus looked at the steel cuffs. Then he looked up at me. The arrogance was gone. The hatred was gone. In their place was a pathetic, terrified desperation. He realized that the woman he had underestimated was the one holding the keys to his destruction. "Elena!" he cried out, his voice cracking. "Baby, please, tell them to stop you. You can't do this. We are husband and wife." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had mocked my intelligence, who had cheated on me with my own money, who had planned to fire innocent workers to cover his crimes. I felt absolutely nothing. No love, no hate, just the cold satisfaction of a job well done. "I am not your wife anymore, Marcus," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. "I am the prosecution witness." The officers shoved him forward, forcing him to walk down the stairs. The room erupted into chaos again, with shareholders shouting questions and reporters flashing their cameras, but I stood perfectly still in the center of the storm, watching them drag him away. I was a queen standing amidst the ashes of the kingdom I had just burned to the ground, and I had never felt more alive. The officer's monotone voice cut through the hysteria like a knife, reciting the Miranda rights right there on the stage. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." It was a humiliating public end to a career built on smoke and mirrors. Marcus slumped in the grip of the officers, his legs giving way as the reality of a decade in federal prison crashed down on him. Sarah Jenkins had no such resignation. She was thrashing against the handcuffs, her face a mask of ruined makeup and sheer terror. "It was him!" Sarah shrieked, her voice cracking as she tried to twist away from the officer. "It was all Marcus. He told me it was legal. He made me sign those checks. Please, I am innocent. I will testify. I will tell you everything." She was throwing him to the wolves before they had even left the building. Loyalty, it seemed, had a price limit, and they had just exceeded it. I turned my back on their pathetic display. My business with them was concluded. I walked over to the long mahogany table where the board of directors sat. They looked like statues, pale and shaken, unable to comprehend that the quiet wife they had ignored for years had just orchestrated a federal raid. I reached into my leather portfolio and pulled out a single document. It was not thick, just a single page, but it carried more weight than the entire building. I uncapped my fountain pen, the gold nib glinting under the stage lights, and signed the bottom line with a swift, decisive flourish. "What is that, Mr. Henderson asked, his voice trembling slightly as he adjusted his glasses. Is that a divorce petition, Mrs. Thorne?" "No, Mr. Henderson," I said, sliding the paper across the polished wood toward him. "This is a share transfer authorization. You might recall the morality clause in the prenuptial agreement Marcus signed 4 years ago. He did not read it carefully, but I did. It states that if one party is indicted for a felony involving financial turpitude or fraud, their controlling interest in all joint assets, including 51% of Thorne Dynamics stock, immediately reverts to the innocent spouse to protect the value of the asset. A gasp went through the group of men. They looked from the paper to me. realizing the shift in power that had just occurred. "I am taking control," I declared, my voice ringing out with absolute authority. "I will be appointing an interim CEO from Veritas Strategy to handle this transition and clean up the books. The company will be saved, gentlemen, but not by him." I turned back to the podium one last time. Marcus was being dragged toward the side exit, his eyes locked on me, pleading, begging for a salvation that was never coming. I looked down at my left hand. The diamond ring Marcus had given me sparkled under the harsh lights. It was beautiful, flawless, and completely hollow, just like the man who bought it. I slid the ring off my finger. It felt heavy, weighted down by 4 years of lies and gaslighting. I held it over the crystal water glass that Marcus had been drinking from just moments ago. I let go. The ring hit the glass with a sharp clink. The sound was small, but final. It rang out in the dead silence of the auditorium like a bell tolling for a funeral. The water rippled, distorting the diamond, burying the symbol of our marriage at the bottom of a glass. I turned on my heel. I walked down the center aisle, the sound of my stilettos clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor. I did not speed up. I did not hunch my shoulders. I walked with the spine of a woman who had nothing left to hide. I did not look back at the man screaming my name. I did not look back at the mistress sobbing in handcuffs. They were already fading into the past, ghosts haunting a building I now owned. I pushed open the heavy double doors and stepped out into the biting Chicago night. The cold air hit my face, shocking my system, scrubbing the scent of stale perfume and expensive cologne from my lungs. It tasted like snow and gasoline and absolute freedom. A black town car was waiting at the curb, the engine purring softly. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I knew by heart. Vance. The familiar voice on the other end answered after one ring. "Mission accomplished," I said, looking up at the city lights blurring against the dark sky. "Thorn Dynamics is secured. The target has been neutralized and is currently in federal custody. I am initiating the Veritas transition protocol now. I am ready for the next contract." I hung up and slid into the back seat of the car. As the door closed with a solid thud, sealing me in the quiet luxury, I finally allowed myself a real smile. I was alone. I was victorious. And for the first time in a long time, the face in the rearview mirror belonged entirely to me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please comment down below where you are listening from. I would love to chat and hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.